I came from the mud, there's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon.
So when we look at specifics of, the dynamics of like racing throughout a year, then you've always got to have like what we call like your A races. Like for me particularly, those A races were always like the national championships. I'd pick 3 events throughout the season that I'd want to peak for, and then working, like with my coach, then we'd always build into those races. And then you have like what we call like these B races. Generally, I'd probably like pick 3 of those, and all those races, whether for me were, it was just kind of practicing, well, maybe they're kind of around like the course profile of the key races that I'm building in towards, or I'm going to try like a different pacing or fueling strategy for my goal race. And then the rest of the races were always like, they're just training. And that's how you've got to consider these races, is the fact that you can't rest up for like every race. So if you're this typical example of a club racer that does 10-mile time trials, you do them on a Wednesday night, you might do one at a weekend, and then you have this ongoing battle. Like you might improve by 1 second, you go back 1 second or 10 seconds, whatever it is. And the reason for that is the fact that your performances are stagnating and you end up detraining. So if we looked at it from a standpoint of like the demands of like the total amount of stress that I'll get for like my local 10-mile time trial, then we're probably going to get like 75 points, like from the training algorithm that Training Peaks gives. And all that basically means is if you look to doing a zone 3, a sweet spot ride, it's just the same. So for that hour, it'll equate to the same amount of stress on your body. Yes, it's going to be a little bit harder. You're just never adapting like the power profile of that athlete. So you just, ultimately, it's like eating the same food. You're just doing the same thing week after week, and your body just kind of absorbs it, and it can never move on. And then when you look at the overall volume in terms of training, it just kind of stagnates. You just never building into like the race. But a great way of adapting that, so if you do want to do like that 10-mile time trial twice a week, then you've probably got to do some training before the time trial and probably like after it. And that can just be like, you can just say to yourself, well, actually, I'm going to do like another hour or 30 minutes at tempo, or even if it's a zone 2 ride, because then you can start to overload like the training. And then what you're ultimately trying to do is, if you map out these key races at the start of the year, you can kind of build into these. And then you always like want to have 3 peaks. So if you were to look at the volume of training that you're having, you're trying to build into one, then you back off, and then you build into the next. I always believe like mentally you can probably only have 3 of these as well, because to try to push through those limits, this is the part that a lot of people struggle with, is if you're just doing the same thing week in, week out, you can't push beyond that barrier. You just got this stagnation. So that's why it's always good to build into like these A races. I think where triathletes, they probably got it a little bit better really, because they don't race as much. They probably do like one Ironman 170.3, and I think it's a lot easier to like build into those events then. But that's when I think a lot of people go wrong, is the fact that they kind of get the taper and everything else wrong for those, because they're scared of like backing off. So it's always like this fine balance. The art of this is just learn from your mistakes. Like if you keep making the same things, you're not improving performance, then that's when you need to get a coach ultimately, or just to kind of work out like what is it that you need implementing into like your training.